Okay. Welcome in, everybody. Good morning. Glad to see people here already. In the chat box, I can see people have been dropping comments already. That's great. As we wait for more people to join the live stream here, tell me where you're coming from. Let's do a little roll call. So tell me like city, country, state, where are you tuning in from? Always like to see that. And okay, here we go. Here we go. We've got, oh my God, now they're just flying. I can't even catch up. St. Paul, Minnesota, Atlanta, Georgia, Dominican Republic. Love it. Upstate New York. Aloha from Hilo, Hawaii. Is that how you say it? Washington, D.C. Wisconsin. We've got Salem, Mass. We've got L.A. in the house. We have Atlantic Canada. Brighton, Michigan. Latvia. Wow, that's cool. Some international folks. Kazakhstan. All right, there we go. Netherlands, West Bengal, Berlin. I love it. Yeah, it's awesome. Thank you guys for being here. Sicily, Indianapolis. All right. And so many more from all over. Wow. London, Dublin, Spain. There's Whitney from Minneapolis, Ireland. Wow, so cool. I love seeing where you're all coming from. I love your program, Canada. Yeah, great. Thank you. Let's see here. Halifax, Nova Scotia. Yes. All right, amazing. So we have maybe about 150 people here in the live stream now. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. Welcome, everybody. This is Adam Ellenboss from Nightlight Astrology, as you all know. Today I'm doing a live stream, and we will be promoting the annual Kickstarter campaign. I'll try to be banging the drum a bit today for that, try to rally some donations and support for the Kickstarter. I kind of have this secret goal of getting to 200 backers today. We're at 176. That would mean we would need 24 more. I feel like we can do it though. So anyway, I'm going to be promoting the Kickstarter. I'm going to be taking your questions. So we'll start off with a little Q&A. We'll transition into some birth chart readings toward the end. And along the way, I will promote the Kickstarter campaign. So first thing I want to tell you guys about is actually not related to any of that. I have a special event coming up. As many of you may know, Ashley and I owned and operated a yoga studio for a long time, and we were used to having a lot of in-person events. If you go to nightlightastrology.com and if you click on the events tab, you'll see that there is now an in-person events tab. If you click on that, you're going to see our first in-person event. It's free. It's on the winter solstice here in Minneapolis. We're meeting at the Grapevine Collective, which is in Minneapolis. The address is there. Cost is free. We're going to get together to celebrate the solstice with a little ritual meditation and movement. A little like get on the yoga mats and do a little time of quiet reflection, and then some time for socializing. We'll have some good snacks. But anyway, if you want to join us for a winter solstice gathering, that is free. It's happening December 21st from 6 to 8:30 p.m. here in Minneapolis. You go to the live events page or the events page on the website, nightlightastrology.com. Click on in-person events. You'll see the winter solstice gathering right there. RSVP, and that way we know you're coming. We know how many people to plan for. So hope to see you guys there. We'll be continuing to promote that as we get closer to the time of the solstice. Whitney says, heck yeah, I'll be there. Can't wait to join in community with y'all. Yes, we're really excited to see you and other friends in the Twin Cities area for sure. So yeah. Now, let's see here. The other main thing that I like to remind people of before we start, whatever we get into, is to remember to like and subscribe. If you're new to the channel, if you've been listening, we did some research earlier this summer that showed that there's a huge amount of people who watch regularly but don't subscribe. It's free to do so. It's easy to do so. And when you do it, it really helps us grow. So if you haven't yet, consider subscribing. Give us a thumbs up. You can find transcripts of any of these daily talks on my website, nightlightastrology.com. All those good, important things. I'm going to start off by pointing us all to the Kickstarter campaign, and I'll come back and talk about it a little bit later as well. But the Kickstarter campaign is an annual campaign. This is my 11th year running it. At the end of the year, the last days of the year, I ask people who watch the channel and appreciate it to consider donating $5, $10, $25. It all counts. It's all very helpful. Both the total number of backers as well as the kind of financial range that we land in is really important for us. And so if you have not yet donated, please consider pitching in. I'm going to throw the link to the Kickstarter in the comments section of the live stream. But you can also find it in the description of this video, or if you go over to the website, nightlightastrology.com, you'll find the 2025 Kickstarter link at the top of the page. So when you go over to the Kickstarter campaign, I'll just show you what it looks like. We are trying to rally the support of 1,937 backers by New Year's. Right now, we're at 176. So we are slowly gaining some momentum here. It's always a little slow the first couple of weeks as we have like the holiday and so forth. When you scroll down, you'll see the different rewards that we offer. There's a bunch of really good rewards that we offer for people when you support the channel in the year ahead. So you can pick up an Astrology of 2025 calendar, the Astrology of 2025 talk that I give covering all of the astrology of the year ahead. The only place I release that is through the Kickstarter. It's exclusive content. You get my new book, which is being released chapter by chapter as an audio book, as well as in text form. That is all about the inner experience of speaking to an oracle, and it is filled with stories. Year ahead horoscope video. This is a great, probably one of the best rewards that we offer, because this is all 12 whole sign horoscopes. So this is Aries through Pisces, and they're each 30 to 45 minutes. So you're getting, upwards of 8 to 9 hours worth of content covering every single sign and the horoscope for 2025, the entire year ahead. So a great bundle there. You get all 12 whole sign horoscope videos when you pledge at the $100 level. I don't release those on the channel. Then after that, you have a bunch of classes we offer, a bunch of previous master classes. They're all 8 to 10 hours worth of content on various topics in astrology. You have our Astrology for Complete Beginners course. You have a couple of reading bundles, the Ask 3 Horary questions. And I guess I sold out of my mini readings. And then you have archived masterclass bundles where you can get all 4 of 2023 or 24's masterclasses. Those are 30 to 40 hours worth of content. You have our Roots and Spheres Moon Circle. We start meeting again under new and full moons in January. That group class experience where we diet plants and work through the moon cycles and reflect together in community is on sale through the Kickstarter. You will find 2025's masterclass series. My wife's herbal apprenticeship courses are on sale. And then the best deal we offer are the class passes for our 4 years worth of curriculum, our first year program, second and third year program, our horary program, all 1 year programs, certification courses. When you purchase them through the Kickstarter, you're going to save about $400 off the early bird rate, about 50% off the normal rate. And then when you bundle them together, the savings go up to really significant numbers. The best one, obviously, is our 4-class pass, which ends up being about 75% off the cost of an individual class itself. So great deals on all of our programs when you donate to the Kickstarter. This deal runs through December 31st, New Year's Eve, and we are trying our best to meet our backer total by that time. I come on to do these live casts as a way of saying thank you for your support and to also rally support for the Kickstarter campaign. So again, if you haven't yet donated, the way to do so is to follow the link in the live stream, which I am posting right here. And then in the description of this video, the comment section of this video, after it's published, and then also on the website, nightlightastrology.com. Okay, so thank you. We've gotten 1 backer since we started here. That's good. We have 23 more to reach my 200 goal for the day. I think we can do it. Anyway, okay, so what I want to do is open up for some Q&A. Q&A is meant for anything. If you have questions that you want to ask me about me, you want to get to know me, as long as they're appropriate, I'm happy to answer. Questions about astrology, of course, anything in astrology that I can answer, I'll do my best. I just ask that you don't ask me individual questions about your birth chart, because without seeing the whole thing and really taking some time with it, I usually can't answer birth chart questions. But we will have birth chart readings in a little bit, and I'll open up for some people to join me in studio. Okay. Alrighty. This is a great question from Maddie. Let's go ahead and open up with this one. What kind of transits would you look for to predict whether a specific situation will resolve for the better, like illness or unemployment? Well, there's 2 answers to that question, Maddie, that I would go to right away. 2 like basic answers. The first one is, did the illness or the unemployment come on during a transit that is still underway? So if someone gets sick while Pluto's opposing their sun, if someone loses their job, as Uranus squares their 10th house ruler or something like that. Often it's when the transit resolves. In other words, when the transit is over, that you'll start to see the sun or Pluto separating from the sun, and the person will start to feel better. So it's one possibility, and everything's so context driven, so it's not like a simple answer. You really have to look at the chart. But one simple answer would be that a transit that is in process, completing its process, will often indicate that something difficult that has been ongoing will start to die down. Another way of looking at it would be, if someone has been dealing with something in an ongoing manner, they've had years of unemployment or years of sickness, and it's clearly connected to something in the natal chart. Let's say they have Saturn in the 1st house and they've dealt with chronic health issues, and you can kind of identify, it looks like Saturn's the culprit here. Well, a transit to Saturn might do the trick. For example, Pluto or Uranus conjoining that Saturn, or there's lots of possibilities, but the basic idea would be that it could be a transit that changes the current pattern if there's been an ongoing chronic kind of issue. So if someone's been chronically unemployed and Pluto or Uranus is about to ingress into their 10th house, Aquarius or Gemini coming up here, that might be a sign that things are about to change. So it's usually not one planet that we look for. It's what's going on, how recent, what transit might be involved with whatever the circumstances are, and then when do we see that transit ending, or what's the next transit we see coming that could interact with whatever the natal signifiers of the difficult situation are, right? Because often, especially with the outer planets, with Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, when they contact a difficult planet in the natal chart that's been representing some kind of held pattern of difficulty, then those planets have often the opportunity that they'll bring us is to change the pattern, to shift it somehow. These are possibilities, and we have to hold them out, not with absolute certainty when we talk to clients, but with, with that educated astrological weighing of the situation. We can provide people with some encouragement and hope. Hey, this transit could do it. Let's keep our eye on this one. And if you have clients that are ongoing that see you, somewhat regularly, it becomes easier to say, yeah, let's come back to this next time we talk. Let's see how it's going, because you'll be right in the midst of that transit or what have you. So, often astrology is giving people meaningful timelines along which to work out their anxieties about certain things. And it really helps, right? It really helps to say, hey, the employment situation could change when Uranus enters your 10th house next June or July. Let's keep our eye on that. So anyway, yeah, great question. Let's continue. Let's see. I like this question. Michelle says, can you give us a book recommendation list outside of the typical ones you use on your channel? We know you love James Hillman, Ren Butler, Liz Green, anything else. I don't know any of Ren's work outside of that archetypal universe book. There's another one that he put together that I can't remember the name of it, but yeah, but I would generally trust his work on archetypal astrology. Richard Tarnas is another one. You guys know I mentioned Richard Tarnas quite a bit. Obviously, Carl Jung. I mean, when I talk a lot about James Hillman, it's sort of because he's a student of Jung and he's within the depth psychology and archetypal psychology movement. So Jung is sort of implied in everything Hillman has to say. So I would add Jung to the list. I mean, there's things that I read that are important for me that are not necessarily astrological, right? Ian McGilchrist wrote a book called The Master and His Emissary. I absolutely love that book, highly recommend it. Of course, Jeffrey Cornelius, The Moment of Astrology. I like Nicholas Campion's work on the history of astrology quite a bit. So those are some like astrological, texts that I appreciate. Let me see here. See, a lot of my work when I made the transition to Hellenistic astrology around 2014, 15 is when that started. And around that time, I just read a ton of history, so history and philosophy, which is not like, I don't know, for a lot of people, that's not necessarily like enjoyable reading. Ian McGilchrist would fit my list though. What is his name? Hold on, I'm thinking of, I can't, hold on, I've got another one for you. Let me just look it up really quick because this is one that I think like a lot of people would like. Let's see, what is his name? John Moriarty, that's his name, John Moriarty. He wrote a book called A Hut at the Edge of the Village. And that is a collection of some of his writings. Some of his writings are a little hard to follow. I'll give you that right away. But he's pretty profound. I like Mary Oliver a lot. I like Sigurd Olson. Sigurd Olson is like a naturalist, kind of transcendentalist nature writer that a lot of his work takes place in the boundary waters of Minnesota, where I grew up. So I really appreciate him. God, there's so many things I've read over the years. It's just like, I mean, if you like nonfiction, then I like Anne Lamott, Annie Dillard, stuff like that. So there's so many books that reach outside of the scope of astrology that have had maybe even a bigger influence on me than astrological texts. So Greg Bottoms, that's an author I really, really love for nonfiction. See, I studied nonfiction in my MFA, so a lot of my influences are creative nonfiction writers. Pilgrim at Tinker Creek, one of my favorite books of all time. I really, there's a ton of poetry that's influenced me. Like I'm a huge Walt Whitman fan. So I don't know. I hope that helps a little bit. It's a good question. I wish I draw a blank when people ask me to just generate a good list of books because I don't know. I've been at times in my life, I've been a really prolific reader. So there's so many titles that I just start drawing a blank. But anyway, okay. Is there a particular experience you've had that aligned with your birth chart that you'd like to share? Well, God, so many, so many. I'll never forget. So there's a story that I have for you guys. So Pluto was going over my moon. It was in a conjunction with my moon. This is story hour. This will take me a second, but it's a good story. Pluto was going over my moon and in the ninth house. And my mother and father had just gotten divorced. I had just gotten married. My wife was pregnant. So it was all very Pluto moon stuff, the kind of death and rebirth around things like home and family. My parents got divorced several months before I got married. several months after we got married, Ashley got pregnant. So that was a very Pluto moon moment. We were in the process of purchasing our first home. It was this little, tiny little house in Bowie, Maryland. And during this process of the sale, the court was forcing the couple that owned the house to sell it through their divorce. And during that process, the owner of the house tried to take his own life. It was unsuccessful, and then hospitalized, and then went to a kind of what do they call them? Inpatient, like a rehab facility, like almost like convalescence or something, like take it easy, get some help. And that delayed the sale of the house. So this was very Pluto right on the moon, right? Like, okay, that's a pretty heavy, dark thing to happen during the sale of a house. He then, during the sale process of the house, his mental health became a real issue, where he would show up at the house after the sale had been processed, and he even he would call us. And back then, people, I don't think they do that anymore, where you have any contact with the owners. I don't know the real estate laws, but anyway, so this guy was like, he found out that I was an astrologer, and he suddenly started believing that I was going to bring evil spirits into his house. And he still thought of it as his house, so it was real weird. And he was a Christian. And I tried to tell him, like, I grew up a Christian. Like, I love Jesus. Like, Jesus is my homeboy. Come on, man. Like, let's be real. And he was really scaring Ashley. Like, yeah, like really, really scaring her, because he would call and he started telling us that there were evil spirits in the basement of the house that we should be aware of. And like, it just really like crazy stuff. And it was all while Pluto was exactly on my moon. So it was pretty freaky for me. And one morning, I was just so fed up with the anxiety about it, because sometimes he would actually drive by the house and just park outside of the house on the street and watch. So I ended up having to call his wife, and then his kids had to come and talk to him, because I guess this is all part of a process of mental health collapse that was taking place in his life, like right when they sold the house. He was really attached to the house, so it was this whole crazy thing. Well, anyway, up the street, about a block from where we lived in Bowie, there was a Methodist church. And I grew up in the United Methodist Church as a preacher's kid. So I was like, okay. And I hadn't gone to church for years. And I just thought, you know what? This guy the whole thing got triggered by the fact that this guy thinks that I'm some kind of pagan evil presence. And it's just triggering some crazy stuff. So I got this intuition that I needed to go to the Methodist church. It was a Sunday morning. We were all just hanging out. And I said, and Ashley was pregnant, we had just moved in, and I was just really scared, so I was like, okay, I'm going to go up the street to the Methodist church, and I'm just going to take communion and just talk to God about this, and also ask God to help this disciple of his, who's obviously a very strong and, a little bit of a fanatical type of Christian here. And I'm just going to pray on it, like, I don't know. It just felt like the right thing to do. So I went up the street to the church, and I sat down in a pew, and that was a small little Methodist church. And, coming down the aisle and just sitting down next to me was the man. And he just sat down on the pew, and he looked over at me, and he was totally in shock, just absolutely in shock. So I scooted right over next to him. And I said, "Hey, how are you doing?" His name was Mr. Kaufman. I said, "How are you doing, Mr. Kaufman?" He said, "I'm good." And he's just very surprised to see me, Anyway, he was a nice guy at heart, He really was. He's just troubled. He just was going through something. And we ended up having communion together. We took communion together right there. And afterward, we were outside, out front, and I told him I'm a preacher's kid. I grew up in the Methodist church, and I was like, I know astrology, for some people, they think it's evil, but for me, it's something that is a part of my personal relationship with God. And I looked at him and I said, "You've been really scaring me, man. Like, calling us, telling us there's evil spirits in the house, coming by the house, like, and I came here today to talk to God and ask for help because I'm scared of you." And he started crying and he gave me a big hug. He said, "It's okay." He said, "It's okay. I'm sorry." He said, I didn't mean to scare anybody." Never saw him again. Never saw him again. That was Pluto on my moon in the 9th house. And that was an incredibly powerful experience. Just listening to that intuition and being honest and giving someone the opportunity to see the good in me and me in them. And yeah, I felt protected and guided. And then from that moment on, I started this interesting thing. I don't know. I felt so thankful to Pluto. I was like, "Thank you, Jesus." And thank you, Hades. And so I had this huge jar of coins. And I took the jar of coins and I put it into the basement. And I sealed it up, and it was just filled with coins and all sorts of other little trinkets and weird stuff I collected. So I put that there and I gave it to Hades, and I said, I said, "You're going to protect this basement for me. And thank you for doing what you did there to create this opportunity for some healing around this house and property." So ever since then, I've kept a jar of coins in the basement of my house, usually in like the boiler room or like some kind of lowest point, as an acknowledgement of the protection that Hades has offered my family. So that's a story. That's a story, right? And there's so many, and that's what my book is all about. If you like that kind of story, The Oracle Speaks is literally a collection of stories that are exactly like that, illustrating the way in which the oracle works in our lives through the symbolism of the planets and through these very interesting ways in which events become arranged meaningfully when we have astrology in our lives. So if you like that kind of story, that's what my book is packed with. Anyway, that's interesting. Okay, let's see. This is a good one. Who's the statue behind you on the stand? Yeah, that's Hermes. That's Mercury. I think it's actually the Mercury, the Roman Mercury, but for me it's Hermes. So yeah. Let's see. One more little shout. Karma says, "If you're considering taking a nightlight offering, do it. Adam is a pretty smart cookie. There's a lot packed in those classes." Thank you. Yeah, I love that. Okay, let's see. Oh gosh. What's the most important thing to know about yods? The most important thing to know is that they don't exist. I'm just kidding. No, I don't work with them personally, so I could not be the one. I'm not the one to speak to it, really, But I always like to tease people, so I'm like there's a little bit of that like get off my lawn in me when it comes to certain things in astrology. That's one of them. Anyway, hi Adam, can you say a bit about how fitness, bodybuilding fit into your spiritual journey and values? Sure. So, well, let me just kind of be clear that the arc of my life has been spiritual, intellectual, philosophical from the time I was born, right? I was born into a family with parents who ended up having 3 PhDs between the two of them, and a lot of focus on theology, philosophy, spirituality. My dad is a pastoral counselor. One of the chapters in my book is called The Prayer Chain, and it's all about the gradual, the way in which I overheard so many spiritual crises and counseling sessions as a kid. And how that started to shape my view of the world and start connecting me to an oracle. It's a big part of my book. Um, so the arc of my life story has always been very like aware of and then in like aware of like psychology, spirituality, religion, mythology, like all of that was baked into me from the time I was really little. And then, there were periods of time, like really critical periods, several of them, in fact, in which my family had to move or relocate because my father's job uh, kind of dictated that that be the case. And during several of those periods, I became kind of more reclusive and socially like anxious because I was just really scary being a new kid. I don't know if anyone's moved a lot, but it's not easy being a new kid. So during a few of those periods of time, my natural inclination was very athletic. I wouldn't say that my family discouraged athleticism, but it was definitely downplayed in favor of intellectualism and spiritualism. And so there was a part of me that at several key junctures, both because of social anxiety and just an emphasizing of different things, didn't have a chance to connect to a part of myself that is very real and like very strong. Like there's a very strong part of me that loves sports, that loves athletics, that loves being physical, that loves competition. And it's like my only container for that ever was to follow sports, like on TV. And as I became older, around my Saturn return, I started working out. And I was a swimmer and I played football and I grew up playing basketball and stuff like that. So those things kind of fell aside and I became so focused on philosophy, psychedelics, the intellectual life, writing, art, really fantastic things, but then was neglecting this very physical, kind of quintessential masculine part of my psyche. And it became very, very apparent to me at about the time that I was leaving the Bhakti yoga community that I was a part of that this neglected part of me needed some care. And for a lot of reasons, psychologically, spiritually, to think to myself that this part of me is not sacred, this part of me is lower or lesser or less evolved or bad, or, those were some of the voices in my head that really thought that this part of me was something you shouldn't tell people about, or, it's like, don't admit because you're a spiritual person that you love sports, stuff like that. So I was like, this is something that I need to give some attention to. Just came on really strong as Uranus was in my first house, in Taurus, like just continuing to amplify the feeling that there was a kind of repressed or stuck part of myself that needed to come forth. And I found out that I was on the very low end, like very close to hypogonadism, like low testosterone. And so when my doctor said you could try some testosterone replacement therapy, see if that works, see if that helps with anything. I tried that, and it was interestingly, that was under the Mars retrograde in Gemini a couple of years ago that started for me. And that, along with a blossoming interest in bodybuilding, weightlifting, weight training, not just that, but diet and nutrition, care for the body, it all came together as something like an unexplored piece of myself that I realized really needed some attention, some care. And there are many different ways that people can do things, and I'm very open-minded. Like whatever I've worked with psychedelics, I'm very open to alternative forms of medicine, therapy, treatment, or traditional ones. It's like, to me, it's just sort of like what works, what's safe, what's good for you. And so yeah, it's been a journey of allowing a part of myself to be just as sacred and meaningful as other parts of myself. And yeah, that's about all I can say about it. The only other thing I would mention is that for me, the awareness of my body, like right now, like, the the amount of care and sensitivity that goes into taking care of my body every day and how my body has transformed over the past 2 or 3 years has been truly amazing. And it's all because I have taken that same monastic approach that I've had to everything, astrology and writing, spirituality, all things that have been a little bit more abstract and intellectual and a little bit more disembodied, right? But if I take the same devoted approach to my body, to caring for my body, to my sleep patterns, to what I eat, to how I train, to how I rest, and if I take those as seriously, it turns out that my body is this really, really fundamentally important thing, right? It's like the temple that's housing my soul. And if I have a clean, tidy, beautiful temple, it changes everything. And I was someone who really diminished the importance of the body relative to things like the mind and spirit. So for me, it's like a real balancing right now. And yeah, at the same time, it's important to recognize, like, I still have prayer, I still have meditation, I still have sometimes maybe about 1 day a week I'll do yoga during certain stretches of the year. I still have astrology, so it's not like somehow swinging into like a meathead world or something, and the people that I've trained with have been really thoughtful, sensitive people who are about holistic health, right? Wellness, healing through diet, things like that. So if there's like one piece of advice that I could give to people for unsolicited, probably, not worth very much, but like feels really true to me, it's that I believe that physical activity and diet could heal us, many of us, from a great amount of what we suffer from. A lot of the things we suffer from mentally, physically, emotionally, I believe can be healed. Maybe not all the way, but a lot of healing can come through something as simple as movement, activity, exercise, and diet, because those features have completely transformed my body and my health and my well-being, like radically. And I can't say that they've been less important than meditation or prayer, right? That those things have been constant for me for a long, long time. This is a daily sadhana, for example. Creating this content every day, year round, is like a great work. It takes a lot of devotion and dedication, and it's a kind of monastic practice in a way. But I would say that I've experienced just as many profound internal and external realizations and insight and growth through care of my body. So one of the byproducts of that, of course, is that there's a whole dimension to developing the physique in bodybuilding that I find really, really interesting. I find it to be like a kind of art form. Not a lot of people think about it that way because you only see the vanity. But to me, like learning how to create a V-taper in the body and to do so in a way that's healthy, right? That's so interesting to me. That's so fascinating that we can literally mold and shape. Our bodies are like clay. What body parts you work, how you eat, how you sleep, you literally will change the shape of your body. It's pretty impressive. So from that standpoint, I find it interesting as someone who is a craftsman with respect to astrology to see that there's a whole craft that has to do with the transformation of physique. And that's been more of like the hobby fascination end of it for me. Okay, well, anyway, those are great questions. Let's go on to some more astrology questions. Hello from Houston. Do you find that astrology is sufficient to embody a spiritual practice without the addition of a more traditionally spiritual tradition? Just seeking. Yeah, Kelly, that's a great question. Personally, it depends. It depends on how you approach astrology, right? Because if astrology is something you're approaching as a kind of moving prayer, moving meditation, it allows you to access the interior space within events, within relationships. It allows you to have meaningful reflection, learning, growth in and through experience because you have a sensitive relationship with the symbols. Then yeah, I don't think you need anything else. I mean, I would say, again, what I just said, like take care of your body, like sleep well, eat well, take hikes, move your body, you know, whatever. That's important too. I think that needs to go with everything. That's kind of how I see things now, because I can't believe I left that part of me behind for so long. So I'm kind of evangelical about it at the moment. You know, I'm like, hey, but if people approach astrology from the standpoint of like the news cycle, you know, if it's like, what's going to happen? What's the next thing? But, you know, there's an anxious attachment to the constant train of astrological forecasting and events and prediction, and a kind of obsessiveness about the way everything's going to happen. A lot of people approach astrology from that standpoint. One of the reasons that I absolutely try to steer away from sensationalism in the way that I present astrology on my channel is because I really don't think it's a good idea for people to have that kind of anxiety existing in their relationship to astrology, you know? So for people who have a more anxious relationship with astrology, it's like a celestial gossip column or like celestial news cycle or something, then no, I don't think it's enough. And you probably need other things to help you develop a better relationship with astrology that need to come outside of astrology, like prayer, meditation, yoga, a spiritual community of some kind. And I'm not prescriptive about that. I'm like, look, how do you connect with your soul? How do you connect with the spirit? How do you connect with God or the divine or whatever you want to, whatever name people feel comfortable giving divinity, right? How do you connect with it? Are you connecting with it? Astrology is absolutely enough on its own, and it has been for thousands of years. For astrology is like a divine language. So if you're speaking that language every day, you're communing with divinity every day. But it depends on how you're communing. Now, the same language can be used for, again, like a really anxious attachment to your ego's stake in things. And there's a very real way in which astrology is meant to address that anxiety and help sort of pacify the ego, you know, while leading the ego back to its role as servant of the soul. If astrology is doing that, I don't think you need anything else other than, you know, take care of your temple. But you can never go wrong adding more things either. If you find approaches to spirituality that are non-fanatical, you know, kind of not something that's taking you into a narrow-minded experience of the universe, then I think that could only be helpful. Why not add more? All right, some technical stuff. Would you say a planet on the ascendant of a solar return chart holds as much value as the ruler of the year by perfection? Yeah, why not? See, I mean, they're omens, right? They're omens and signs. So what I would say is, as the reader, when you're looking at that chart, do you feel really drawn as the reader, right? Do you feel drawn to that? Because we think, what we don't realize about most astrological techniques is that they're tools, not rules. So when someone says, oh, the perfected ruler of the year, that is so important. Well, yeah, okay, great, but why? Right? You know, why is it more important than a planet on the ascendant of the solar return? And I don't think you'll usually get a clear answer to that. Well, I don't know, you know, Abu Mashar said to pay attention to it, so I've placed it at the top of a, you know, it's like, yeah, Abu Mashar was a diviner, and when he's teaching, he's giving you lists of things to look for, or he's giving you kind of like hierarchies of craft. But everything in astrology is highly contextual, as are all oracular crafts, the I Ching, tarot. So context is everything. What's going on in the person's life, and then what context does that provide us when we look at the solar return and we see that planet on the ascendant? That might dictate the importance of the planet on the ascendant more than the ruler of the year. So, and even then, it's like, it's rather subjective, isn't it? If you evaluate things at the end of that year, and you may find that, yeah, well, indeed, the ruler of the year seemed to have more of an impact, or the ruler of the ascendant would. But either way, what we're doing as readers is trying to pay attention to symbols that are speaking and try to provide an interpretation of those symbols that's meaningful. And if we see a couple of things that are competing for attention, just talk about both of them. Just say they could both show up in a really strong way this year, you know? Yeah, good question. Michelle, I donated last year to support your book, but it does not appear to have been sent in full. Does that mean those of us who already donated last year have to donate again to get the rest of it? No. So if you donated for the book last year, you're just in the process of receiving the chapters. So I have 7 of 12 chapters written so far. So when new people pick it up and they log in, they'll get those 7 chapters. And then just like you, they'll get the rest of them as they're released. So I'm in the process of writing the 8th chapter right now. And I think it'll probably be released before the end of the year. But it just depends on a few other things I have to finish for the Kickstarter. So then when the 8th chapter is released, you get the audio and the text, and then the 9th and the 10th. So people who are already signed up, you're already in the Thinkific group where, or the Thinkific page where the book is being released chapter by chapter. So definitely don't get it again. Get something else this year, you know, because you'll get the rest of them as they're released. And then people who are new to it are just immediately getting the first 7 chapters and then get the rest of the 5 chapters as they come out. Okay. Oh my gosh. Okay, I have to go all the way down. Okay. Sorry, it's really hard to get, like, scroll through the text because there's so many new ones that are posting that it like skips around. Someone asked me if the crawl space counts for placing an offering to Hades. I think so, yeah. Okay, BB Vision says, do you believe that light workers and star seeds and the like are breaking ground when it comes to the ascension? Do you believe there will be a powerful shift in consciousness? So, yeah, I mean, I feel like I might come off as a bit of a curmudgeon on this subject, right? But, you know, I don't really believe that there are light workers or star seeds or an ascension or a breaking of ground or a shift in consciousness. I think that these are real, these ideas, and there are manifestations of these ideas, but they're archetypal, which means that there's no, like, how can I put this? And this just comes from my own background in the forms of mysticism that I've studied, right, and been influenced by shamanic experience with ayahuasca, yoga philosophy, Taoism, Hermeticism, etc. And I mentioned this a little bit in a video that I did recently on the New Age and Pluto into Aquarius, right? So, yeah, I guess my essential answer to that is that, like, we have an experience of time, right? We have an experience of history, and we can project onto that experience of time and history a progressive storyline. Things get better through time. People appear to help things get better through time. But one thing that's pretty common among ancient mystics is they viewed time as cyclical, for example. And so if you just think about it creatively like this, there's, rather than thinking that there's a big bang and then everything comes forth from that and then reaches some purpose, you know, through time. Imagine that the big bang is a cyclical recurring experience. So the universe expands and contracts, like Vishnu sitting on the cosmic ocean, releasing all of the worlds from the pores of his body and then sucking them back in and then blowing them back out and sucking them back in. In time and space, these cycles of history, of progress, of regression, of light ages, of dark ages, are all cyclical manifestations of the interplay of light and dark. And within those cycles, it might make sense to talk about certain people or souls or periods as progressive or ascending or star workers or light seeds or whatever. But those ways of looking at time and space are archetypal and taking place within cycles of time that have no beginning or end. right? So we're talking about like what Plato said, which is time is the moving image of eternity. And so like the way that I've learned to think about time and history is like a circle. And so do I believe that there's an ascension? Yes, but not without an eventual descent, right? And the descent not with an eventual ascent, right? So I have been taught through the lineages I've studied in to not get caught up or identified with the cycles of history because they're not the place that the transformation of consciousness that we're looking for in spiritual life takes place. In other words, history is not our salvation, right? It's like doesn't mean we're not participating or meant to participate as people in the world along timelines that are very much a part of light and dark ages and so forth and so on. But that role is secondary to the primary mystical, devotional connection in love to our source and to the souls of other people. It's like love is primary, not history, right? And love is something that cannot be conceptualized as an ascent. Love is both down and up at the same time. It's both the horizontal and the vertical at the same time. So love is eternal, right? So the shift in consciousness is not something that can be understood through hierarchies and progressions through linear time. And so I don't think about shifts in consciousness that deliver us to the final state of love as progressive, historical, linear, hierarchical. And I find it sort of repulsive when New Age people conflate the two, right? That's just me though. And I might be just grouchy and I could be totally wrong about that too. I'll find out, I'll keep living like everybody else. And, we're all joined together in this reality. So I try to listen and value and take in what other people may think about with respect to things like this, but that's kind of where I stand. I hope that makes sense too. It doesn't sound overly grouchy. Let's see here. This is a kind of loaded question, but a lot of people go through your program. Has there ever been a time where a former student was making their astrology public that wasn't in line with your teaching? Yeah, sure, all the time, right? That happens all the time. And I think that's a part of that happened to us when we were yoga studio owners, doing yoga teacher training programs. Mostly my wife and her staff led those, but I would participate often with contributions on the yoga philosophy end of things. Yeah, and that's inevitable, and you can't try to control that. And you can't. Personally, I don't, because each person has to go on their own journey with what they learn and how they express what they learn. And we need to be, I think, just patient and compassionate and hold space for people to express things differently than we do. Because sometimes people may be expressing things differently than we do, and that's okay. Like there's room for a diverse range of expressions. It's not just like, people shouldn't. I don't want people to just be like me, when they come through our programs. At the same time, there will be some people who will come through the program who will be doing astrology in a way that is, sensationalist and egotistical and performative in ways that are just very unimpressive to me. And it's not my business to say anything. I'm just kind of like, I might be a little bit bummed out, but that's a lot different than someone just teaching ideas and thoughts that are different from my own, but doing them in integrity, which I think is a really good thing, right? There's very few, though. I feel like most of the people who come through our programs are have a lot of integrity. So it's not often that I see people coming out of the programs and representing astrology in a way that I find offensive. Sometimes it happens, but yeah, I mean, I remember we had people coming through our YTT programs, many of which who would go out and teach yoga in wonderful ways. And then, we'd hear someone was teaching a beer yoga class where it's like you drink beer and do your yoga. And to us, that's kind of like, not sure I really like that, but it's also like not really our place to judge people or, so you just kind of, it's part of the deal, I think. That's a good question, though. Let's see. So many good questions, and I typically could go on the Q&A for like maybe about an hour, and then we'll switch into some birth chart readings. Lisa says Mars is not always a malefic. Yeah, I mean, the way that I would say that, Lisa, and you might disagree with this, I would say Mars is always a malefic. It's just that malefics aren't always bad. The categories, we don't want to abolish those categories because those categories are an integral part of how we describe the karmic landscape of life in like a consensus reality where good and bad are often agreed upon, right? So like most people would rather, have a nice day than have a rotten one where all sorts of challenges come up and someone is really rude to you. And those kinds of basic consensus reality karmic distinctions of this world are maintained through the language of astrology and its distinctions. But that doesn't mean that ancient astrologers did not hold a very clear understanding of all of the planets as divine and as the condition of the planet. The condition of the planet can greatly shift how we read the planet as more or less constructive. Or does the courageous, brave, persevering side of Mars come out? Or is Mars the god of conflict and misfortune coming out? A lot of that is context driven. And so when we say Mars is not always a malefic, we should also know precisely what conditions Mars tends to show up in more constructively versus those which Mars does not. And as long as people are aware of that, then I'm okay with that kind of statement. Otherwise, it's important to keep malefics malefic. We have to have those categories and then know how to work within them, know how to work with their contextual situation to suss out when they are and are not as malefic. That's the way I teach in my programs. But it's to your point, broadly speaking, I don't disagree, right? What diet are you following? Oh, I could talk about this all day. I'm just going to say something briefly because I like this question. You said, I've struggled with an eating disorder for years and find getting back into fitness triggering. Would appreciate tips about healing through diet. Yeah, well, first of all, just prayers to you, because that's not easy. Eating disorders are a real thing, and not to be solved through like, go work out and eat well, like just trite, that's not helpful. So, the particular care that you need it may be very specific to you, may need a team really, of supportive people or therapeutic allies when you're dealing with something like that. And I say that because my wife has been very public about an eating disorder that she dealt with when she was a teenager, and it kind of takes usually like kind of like a team of people that are supporting you. She saw a naturopath. She got into yoga. She changed her diet. Like there's a lot of things that went into my wife overcoming that, and then knowing how to work with that part of her psyche too going forward. Because kind of like addiction, not the same, but kind of like addiction, where the potential to backslide into addictive behavior for me as someone who dealt with opiate addiction in my early 20s is always there. So, I have to be aware of that part of my psyche and how to deal with it. And I think that's a big thing for us with food. It's like, how do you deal with a part of you that's not going anywhere? There's nothing wrong with pleasure. There's nothing wrong with eating. There's not, and yet there's, maybe there's some shaping or guiding of that part of us, the impulse control, the pleasure, whatever it is. And it's psychological and it's related to trauma. And it's really complex. So one thing that I would say right away is there's not a diet. I'm really like anti-diets. I shouldn't say anti-diets. Like if people want to use a diet, fine. But what I've learned from working with several different nutritionists and trainers over the past 3 years now, working out. So for the past 3 years, I have worked out like religiously 5 days a week, sometimes 6, usually 5, and including cardio and then a dietary plan. I would call it a plan, not a diet. All of my trainers have emphasized that every body is unique, right? Everybody metabolizes things differently. Some foods are easier to work with as fuel than others. Some macros are easier to work with than others. Like some people need different distributions of fat to carbs to protein. Some people need a lot of one and less of another, and it's very individual. And I think the best dietary plans are plans that are made with a nutritionist who will try things on and figure out, okay, what has you feeling best, right? Like, and to me, like for me, meal plans have been important, right? So everyone's different though. Like I don't like counting calories. I can't stand counting calories. It drives me nuts. Very triggering for me. So maybe you're in the same boat there. However, what I like about my trainers is that they give me my macros and my total calorie count for the day, but then I don't have to think about it because they just tell me, here's what you're going to have for your breakfast. Here's what you're going to have for your snack. Here's what you're going to have for lunch, your afternoon snack, and your dinner. And then we're going to see how you're doing. We're going to see how you sleep. We're going to see how you feel training. We're going to, and we check in and we talk like regularly. So if you can afford a nutrition coach who maybe writes your workout plan, if it's like 2 days a week, or if it's 3 days a week, or if it's 5 days a week, and creates a meal plan for you that you can work from. And maybe there's some flexibility too, like, well, in your vegetables for this meal, you can choose any of these things. For your carbs in this meal, you can choose any of these things. And they give you the amounts to make of each one. So in that sense, it's not a diet, right? It's just a distribution of macros that's being figured out for your unique body. And the appropriate amount of calories that's gauged within those macros to also make sure that you're kind of, if you have the goal of maintaining, like I just want to be healthy and maintain my physique, or if you want to like lose a little bit of fat and water on your body, or if you want to put on a little muscle, or like whatever the goals are, that will also be a part of how the macros are shaped, right? So the simple point being that most of us, and I'm very much a part of this, most of us never received the education through anything. I mean, like I didn't, there's very little education that is made accessible to people. There's people talk about all kinds of different diets, but very rarely do we talk about just eating organic, healthy, non-processed foods and figuring out the best personal macro spread and total amount of calories, and then creating meal plans that work within that. It's basic human care of our bodies, and most of us don't know how to do it. I mean, I didn't know how to do it. And not only that, but I found it very stressful to have to try to think of doing it on my own. Now I can do it on my own after 3 years of having a lot of coaching and a lot of care with the macro planning. And I understand how my metabolism works with some kinds of things versus other kinds of things. And that's all very personal. And the point is that when we think of a problem that we have, a problem or a pattern in our bodies in terms of like a one size fits all solution, just do this diet. Well, it's been studies have shown that people are not able to usually maintain diets for a long period of time, that they'll be successful with it for a while and then they'll fall off. And the reason for that is that it's not sustainable. Diets aren't sustainable. Lifestyles are sustainable, right? So those are just my opinions, take them or leave them. But all I would say is that it's personal, and anything that's like prescriptive and too general and kind of trendy is usually not going to last or work. You kind of need to find something that feels good, that tastes good, and that doesn't feel too strict, but is also smart and gets to know your body in particular. What advice, Laura asks, do you have around navigating perfectionism, ego versus intuition when it comes to practicing astrology and using it as an oracular art in your own life and in service to others? Well, I think it's important to think about being helpful versus being right. Like when we approach working with clients, we do want to get things right in terms of forecasting, delineations, and stuff like that. But I find that if I lead with how can I be helpful here, that usually kind of circumvents the temptation to be right here. So it's, when we serve people and we have an eye for service to a soul that's sitting with us, that's going to help us move around the temptation to get it right in a reading. And I think if we keep that in mind, that's usually the easiest way to avoid perfectionism and ego in astrology. One of the things that I always find sort of troubling, right, is that there will be waves of people during like political seasons, astrologers making public predictions, and then really celebrating if they get things right. Like, look at me, I got it right. And one of the things that irritates me about that is that it's our job to be doing accurate, meaningful predictions for human beings and for people like day in and day out. But you don't see astrologers being like, hey, you know what? Today I spoke with Janet, and I successfully predicted that she would get pregnant. My point being is just that there's this whole world of like trying to demonstrate how accurate or like, look at me, I got this or that prediction right or whatever. And it's never made any sense to me because is that not our job? Is that not what we're meant to do every day, is offer people meaningful and hopefully relevant, accurate archetypal predictions? I mean, maybe not specific things like as much as kinds of topical thematic timelines. Like, for example, these kinds of events and themes are likely to happen around this time with this transit, right? But that's the job of an astrologer. Astrologers are doing prediction day in and day out. And yet we seem to get stuck on how correct we are about big public or mundane predictions. Or people will drag astrologers for getting them wrong. It's like, yeah, well, that whole thing to me is just sort of obnoxious. But anyway, okay. Chas says, I find bodybuilding to be a basic exercise in physical manifestation. That's cool. Yeah. It's really interesting the way in which most coaching in bodybuilding will emphasize the connection to muscle contraction and breathing. It's not a lot different from pranayama. It's like pranayama with engaged muscles. That's my reflection. It's very spiritually actual experience of getting into the body too. All right, I'm scrolling down. Let's see maybe another question or two before we switch gears here. What is a piece of advice you'd give to work with challenging placements? Well, that's a great question. I mean, the first piece of advice that I would give is you're not working with a challenging placement, right? You're working with a challenging dimension of your life. Because we think somehow that the chart has power. The chart is just a mirror filled with symbols. So the first thing I would do is take away the idea that what you're working with is something in the chart. The chart is mirroring something that you're working with in your life. All of us have difficulties in our lives. All of us have difficult chart placements. By that, we just mean that the chart is reflecting something difficult in our life. The chart is not the problem. The chart is not the source. The chart is not the cause. The chart is not you. Like, all of those things are really important, because then you don't have to think about trying to figure something out that exists in a chart. You can think about figuring something out that exists in you. And there's a couple of approaches. One is active, right? Like, if you can identify the thing you're struggling with, maybe you can come up with a plan for being proactive and addressing it and creating change through work, through discipline, through devotion, through self-care, whatever is needed. Along the way, you should probably, I think the best advice is to do what you can, but also, don't be attached to results. Some things are hard to change. Some things take a long time to change. Some things can't change, but the effort, the care, the attempt, that matters. Sometimes more than what changes is just a change of consciousness, a change of attitude that can help us live with something that's harder to change. So, sometimes there's also like a level of surrender and acceptance that we need. And it's like, do what you can, and also surrender and accept. There's that great saying that's at the start of every Al-Anon meeting I attend. It's like, God, give me the serenity, help me to change the things that I can, help me to let go of the things that I can't change, and help me to know the difference. How does the prayer go? Let me see. See, I have it memorized, but yeah. God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. If you take that as your prayer, approaching the things that you're trying to work with in your life that are difficult, and you extract that sense of the difficulty existing in the chart and rather see it as existing within you, within your soul, and within the scope of human experience, it's existential, right? Then I think you can do what you can or accept and live with what you can't change. Yeah. Okay. This was an interesting Q&A, but less birth chart readings, a bit of false advertisement in my humble opinion. But we haven't gotten to the readings yet. We're not there yet, ye Canuck. Hold your pants. Okay, let's see. So many, oh my God. Okay, let me get to the bottom here. All right. Okay. All right, so I think what we'll do now is I'm going to shift into, for the sake of those people holding pitchforks, let's change into some birth chart readings. So if you would like to join me in studio, I'm going to take a few people for readings, and let me tell you how you can join. So the email address. Oh, yes, thank you. Someone just reminded me. I'm going to do a quick plug for the Kickstarter before we get into it. Actually, you know what? I'll send this out, then I'll do the pledge for the little promo for the Kickstarter. So you're going to email us, and I want you to email your time, date, and location of birth to grabbed@nightlightastrology.com. That's the email address. Grabbed@nightlightastrology.com. Send me your name, your time, date, and location of birth, and any specific topic that you'd like to look at together. I will then call 4 or 5 people into the studio. We'll see how many readings we can get through, and I will send you a link to join in the studio. So watch your email. If you're going to send me an email, you better watch your email, because sometimes I send to people and they just don't respond. So, okay. So send your email to grabbed@nightlightastrology.com, and I'll call some people into the studio for some readings. Yeah, today was a little bit more philosophical and personal, but every Q&A is a little bit different. And next week I'll be doing another live stream, and perhaps we can focus a little bit more on technical astrological questions then as well. Personally, it's nice for me to explore different kinds of questions in Q&As, because it's also a chance for me to talk about different things too. All right, anyway. Okay, so the Kickstarter. Thank you all for being here today, and I hope that this is useful for all of you. Yes, you need to be able to be on camera. Kickstarter link is in the comment section of this video, in the description of the video, on the website nightlightastrology.com. You can also find the link in the chat box. I just put it in there. We're at 180 backers now, and so 20 more to go for today's goal of 200. I think we can get there. 20 more backers. $5, $10, everything helps. Like any little donation helps because it's the total number of backers as well as the range of finances that we land in at the end that matters. So for us, every donation counts. When you go over to the Kickstarter, you will find a variety of rewards. One of the best things that you can do if you want to study astrology is find a school that speaks to you. If you like my work, I'm absolutely positive you'll like our programs, you'll like our staff of teachers, our tutors. It's a whole team and community at Nightlight that will guide you through 4 different years worth of astrological material. At the very bottom, you'll find our class bundles. You can get the first year program for 50% off the normal rate, $400 off the early bird sale, which is the typical sale we run prior to the start of programs. And then scroll down, if you add 2 courses together, the savings goes up. 3 courses together for only $200 more, the savings goes up even more. And then 4 classes is our best deal. The 4-class pass gives you all 4 years of Nightlight programming. You can also use one of those for a yearly masterclass series. So really any of our programs become available to you through the 4-class pass, and that saves you almost 75% off the cost of each individual program. So that's the best deal. In terms of like lower priced items, if you want to make a kind of, you're on a budget, you want to donate, get something, but you need it to be a little bit more cost effective or whatever, then the Astrology of 2025 video where I break down all the astrology of the year ahead at the $50 tier. My book is at the $75 tier. And then that, by the way, the book is something that 7 chapters of which have been released, 5 more are coming. So when you get into that account for the book, which is it's held on Thinkific, you'll get the audio chapters and the text chapters of the first 7 that have been released. And then every month or 2, I release a new chapter. So you'll get the rest of them as they come out. And then that'll be probably a good 2 years before it hits print form. Then we have the year ahead horoscope readings, and that's going to be all 12 whole sign horoscopes, Aries through Pisces included in that reward, and they're all 30 to 45 minutes each. So a really in-depth look at all of the sun and rising sign horoscopes for the entirety of 2025. So those are really good rewards. You can pick up when you donate. Thank you to everybody who's already donated. We have a long way to go. We still need about 1,700 backers to get there by the new year. And as much as I love that so many people pour in at the very last moment, it also gives me a slight heart attack every single year. So, so if you have a little time and space and you plan on donating, helping us get there in a slower and steadier manner as opposed to 1,000 donations in the last 5 days. It's always a little bit better on my end, but anyway. So I appreciate all of you. Thank you for making this channel what it is. It really is because we have such a great audience that this channel is successful in my opinion. Okay, now I'm going to send some people links to connect and come in with us here. So give me just a second. I will send a few out. Okay. Gosh, there's so many. All right, let's go to, all right. All righty, here we go. Okay, so I'm sending out these links now to some of you who have responded. And just be sure to watch your email. I wish I could get everyone in here, and I just do this randomly. So let's see. All righty. Trying to see if I can find a dude in here somewhere. We never have guys. All right, here we go. All right, now I invite usually more people than I can take, and the reason for that is that sometimes people come in here and then they just randomly sign off while having to wait. So yeah, let's see. Okay. Okay, I see Brooke has joined me and Laura. All right, great. We're going to bring, and good, we've got Andrew here. Okay. Make sure that your connection is stable. Like Brooke, I can see that you're there, but you're walking around and your connection's not stable, so you might want to sit down someplace if you can. Let's see here. All right, Laura. Hey, how's it going?
Good. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you for being here. Oops, you know what? This whole time I've not had my, oh my God, I haven't had the correct microphone attached. There we go. I think my audio is probably a little bit better now. Okay, Laura, let me get your birth data. Hold on just a second. What is your date of birth? I can hear you now, yeah.
Okay. My date of birth is 4/16/81.
And the time? Did you get that? The time?
Oh, 7:29 p.m.
Okay, and then the place?
Buffalo, New York.
Okay. All righty. So let me just make sure I've got this. Scorpio rising, does that sound right? All righty. Let's put this up. By the way, I'm friends with Laura on Instagram. She makes wonderful art. You guys should check it out. Where can they? What's your Instagram handle so people can go check out your artwork? You're muted.
I'm hearing the audio double. That's why I'm like being weird. My Instagram is just my full name. It's Laura Via Piano at Laura Via Piano.
Okay, yeah. Check it out. Really nice artwork for sure.
Thank you.
Okay, so here's your birth chart on the screen. Got that big Libra Aries connection in the chart. That's impressive. But tell me, what do we want to look at today? Like, what would be the most interesting thing we could key in on for you?
So I have but mostly my art practice. I have like a lot of perfectionism going on in my psyche. And I've been trying to really progress my business and create like a practice that's sustainable and show up consistently. And I feel like I'm constantly making this much progress, but feeling like I'm failing a lot, and I just deal with a lot of that. So I wanted to address maybe the transits that are helpful to like latch onto and follow to help with that.
Yeah, totally. Do you find that the perfectionism exists in other areas of your life, or is it mostly just your artwork?
It's just in general. I find it like generally sort of like paralyzing. And I'm super aware of it, which I don't know if that makes it better or worse, to be honest.
Right. Yeah. One of the things that it can be a real pattern with Libra planets is perfectionism. And we don't, it's not a planet, it's not a sign that people generally think about as perfectionistic. Like usually people will use that word for Virgo, for example. And I'll never forget this distinction that Liz Green made that I found super useful when comparing Virgo and Libra, which was that, Virgos are
they're concerned with things being good and they're effective and useful and sort of like organized and like that kind of like almost like an effective practical concern for doing the right thing or being useful or getting things right. But with Libra, it's more of an abstract kind of Platonic sense of perfection because it's an air sign that exalts Saturn. So when you have the moon and Jupiter and Saturn and Pluto all together, those placements kind of collectively are kind of like an architectural digest or something. It's like there's a sense of a very lofty, pristine sense of what is beautiful and balanced and true, like an architect, like someone who has a sense for what is beautiful and also symmetrical. And so there's just a very high, lofty kind of understanding of the laws and rules alongside of the beauty. And when that exists in the 12th house, the problem is that now we're taking those beautiful qualities, which could be a big part of why you're successful as an artist, for example. But now we're placing them into a position in the chart that was considered a kind of blind spot for the native. And so there can be a way in which we, I think, for example, of that super universal myth of the Tower of Babel. Do you remember that story? It's like, let's design something that reaches us all the way up to the realm of the gods, that climbs the stairway to heaven, right? Or another one would be like Prometheus and the theft of fire. There's always a feeling of, in these stories of being punished or of there being like a tower card in relation to having tried to build a tower. And so people that have really finely developed Libran placements, airy placements too, Aquarius is often like this as well, will sometimes feel as though the lack of perfection results in some form of punishment. Like if I'm not able to reach this highest thing, then, there's almost like a feeling of being a letdown, being a failure. Something polar opposite to perfection is like a sinner rather than a saint, or complete destruction rather than the perfection of the tower. You have the crashing of the tower. So one of the things that can happen with the 12th house Libra is a tendency to be perfectionistic and then to feel like, there's this pattern of like disasters that occur that also make you feel like no matter what you do, your best efforts kind of end in ruin, or they don't turn out the way you think they should, or there's this real disappointment or sense of falling or failure relative to a standard. So, it's part of living with a really refined sense of what is possible, like artistically, or even in relationships, like what you want out of a relationship or what you seek in a partner or what you believe to be possible as a state, in your relationship. And then what it actually is in comparison can, again, feel like this really extreme kind of swing from what you believe something could be to what it ends up being. So the 6th house, when you have all of those Aries planets, is really interesting because the 6th house is compared to the loftiness and sort of inaccessibility with the Libran planets in the 12th. You have this kind of feeling of planets struggling out under the hot sun in the 6th. The contrasting view that Aries might present with 4 planets in Aries in the 6th is like anything that you want in this world is going to be an act of great work and sacrifice, and is going to be muddy and conflicted, and there's going to be a little blood and sweat and tears and elbow grease that's put into it. And even then, it will be ongoing. There will be all these renewable stressors that you have to live with. And that contrasting view is really, in many ways, the direction that the chart wants to go in. Look, for example, at the North Node ruled by the Sun in Leo at the midheaven. The Sun exalted in Aries with Mars in its own domicile and its own joy in the 6th house. So I would imagine that part of sort of unpacking the 12th house in a chart like yours would be learning to live with the tumultuous conditions of life. Like life is in part slavery, that's the sixth house, like MO. And so learning to live with the burn, learning to live with the frustration of carrying the work of your life, the art of your life, the relationships, the love, and that there's going to be a way in which you have to persevere and believe in yourself and keep going and just live with imperfection. That's kind of the gospel of a bunch of planets in Aries in the sixth. That doesn't mean you can ever really let go of the high standards that Libra has in the 12th, but if there isn't a willingness to sort of live in the mud of the sixth, that 12th house will end up feeling like something you fall short of. It's sort of like a torturous standard you can't live up to. And then by contrast, the sixth house will make you feel like no matter what you do, it's not good enough. So holding the tension between a full moon across those signs, big stelliums across those signs and houses, in many ways, it is about living in the liminal space that is like, like an artist in the ancient world. You imagine some of the temperaments of artists were melancholic. They lived with a sense of the world as a hollow, shallow, disappointing place. And it was precisely that view of the world that might have made them the village healer or the village artist or what have you. Well, that's fine and dandy. But then when you have a bunch of planets in the sixth, there's also some demand that you be in the world, that you be working in the field of the world. And so it's like you've got a hut at the edge of the village and also a clear battle cry to be in the thick of the field. So I would say that one of the transits that I would look to that you've just been through would be like, Pluto just finished with your Venus. You just had that long transit of Pluto squaring your natal Venus from last degree of Capricorn. What was that like? What were any highlights? Was there anything powerful that you can recall during this recent transit?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
So I'm hearing you twice, 5 seconds apart. So I can understand you, but it's really hard for me to follow.
Oh no. Okay. That's too bad.
Oh, did it stop? I don't know.
Do you want to try taking
now I hear
out
you again.
You want to try taking out your headphone and see if it works with just the normal speaker?
I did do that.
You might want to mute the stream if you have the stream also playing on your...
That's probably what it is. Okay.
Yeah, someone just mentioned that. Okay, there we go.
Brilliant. Thank you, person.
All right. So, yeah. So what I was saying in summary is just that the sixth house planets will call you to be in the work and grit of life. And there's a lot of emphasis on that for you to be successful and embodying a feeling of meaning, purpose, accomplishment. The North Node's in Leo near your midheaven, ruled by the exalted sun in the sixth. These planets in the sixth house are meant to, like the sixth house is sort of like, if you could think about the view that most animistic traditions have had, which is that life itself is a boiling cauldron. Everything that lives is part of a cycle of death, and everything that dies is a part of the cycle of life. And it's just this burning, churning cauldron. And if you don't throw something into it and you just try to avoid it altogether because it's messy, you will suffer. And it's actually easier to throw yourself into the cauldron and to work the soil of life than to try to bypass it because it's uncomfortable and not perfect. Yeah. And the sixth house is really all about that in your chart, whereas that south node in Aquarius in the fourth, connected to the exalted Saturn as its ruler in the 12th with all of those planets up there. I just wonder if maybe there's even past lives. I don't know anything about past lives, but let's just say that there were past lives in which you had an exceptional understanding or knowledge or wisdom of something, but it was from afar, or it was from a distance, or it created the ability to stay apart from other people as opposed to going into things that were vulnerable and messier and harder to deal with. That perfectionism is something that could isolate or draw you out of yourself or undermine you, is indicated by all the planets in the 12th in Libra. At the same time, all of those planets really do suggest a very refined sense of intelligence, beauty, taste, aesthetic. It's just we don't want those things to become sources of dissociation, disembodiment, disappointment, falling short, blah, blah, blah. And so I think that's precisely why we see, North Node's ruler as the sun calling us to the stellium in the 6th and saying, nope, you're going to have to be bravely, radically in it and accepting of the kind of burning difficulties of life. And actually, the more you embrace it, the easier things get. And the more that the most beautiful things that you seek to approximate in your artwork will come to be appreciated by others. The relationships you seek will come to be substantialized, because there's some willingness to compromise and be in the world with the frustration of it all.
Yeah. I always feel like I'm willing to do the work, but I have this like idea that I'm supposed to do something that is represented by those 12th house planets. But it's like, okay, how do I do that? How do I really get into the grid of that and like stay aligned with that and stay focused on that and follow that in the way that I'm meant to? And I have a lot of like hedonism too. So it's like constantly like I'm willing to do the work and get into it. But then I'm constantly questioning if that work is like the right work or in the right direction or valuable enough. It's like it's always being called into question for me. So, and it's like, do I want to just, I've always been an artist and I've always been interested in the arts, but how do I make that something that is like in service to people? And, you started talking about the Venus and Capricorn transit. Were you meaning the
Pluto and Capricorn squaring your Venus?
Oh, well, I had a lot of like, would that be the whole Pluto cycle?
No, that would have been like just the past couple of years. You had Pluto squaring your Sun and Venus, maybe the past 2-3 years.
I got sober, so I think maybe that was a big,
there you go.
Probably the biggest part, the biggest change in my life, which caused me to like look at things from a different perspective and look at myself from a different perspective and like probably focus more on service and questioning not only if the work is good enough or what I'm doing is good enough, but how it's helping people.
Sure.
And also like a new interest in astrology and like wanting to learn that and study that and maybe use that as a way of being in service as well.
So. Yeah. One thing that I always suggest to people is when we think about being in service to other people, one very ancient idea that you find in the concept of dharma in Indian astrology and in the concept of the daimon in Hellenistic astrology is that service to the daimon or service to your dharma is the first consideration. If you do that, there will be a natural way in which service to others occurs. But if you think about service to others first, there's a way in which we might accidentally miss the part where we have to figure out something essential about us. And that something essential about who we are has to be like tapped into in order for that service to others to be accomplished. Because there's a lot of generic ways of thinking about service that won't then produce anything of real substance or value from within ourselves.
Yeah.
So like one thing that I would say is, getting sober, for example, is often something that happens along a timeline in which someone will then start to think about what actually makes me feel happy, right? Like this is maybe not making me feel so happy. It's been maybe not the greatest way of trying to create happiness. It's not a healthy way or sustainable way. So I'm going to get sober. And then along the lines of sobriety, it's usually like, well, what do I fill my life with now? What do I seek for pleasure, for happiness, for, connection? And as we start to discover that on the path of sobriety, we're going to get closer to our dharma, right? Which is that kind of natural part of ourselves that when we tap into and we do things and we act from that place, there's like living substance coming out of us. That's the daimon. It's like, if it's astrology, then the way it'll be of service to others is, does it light you up inside when you talk about it, when you learn it, when you share it with other people? Do you feel like there's a spirit coming through you?
Right.
And that kind of energy is, anytime you give that energy to other people, whether you're an artist or an astrologer or whatever else, if that's what's coming through you, that is of service to other people, because the real service is the sharing of that spirit of life.
Yeah.
That's the real gift. So I would wonder if that's not also a really big part of it, because when you have a sun in the 6th house, the other big question that has to be asked is, what is my life purpose that I can work and suffer and sacrifice on behalf of, but I can do it specifically because the spirit runs through me and it's passionate. The 6th house is a Mars house and it's a passion house. It's like, it burns a little bit to do these kinds of things, but better burn for something you love than something you can't stand.
Yeah, that's me all the way. I can't do anything I can't stand.
Yeah. And it's like, well, what often, in my opinion, when you have fiery placements in the 6th house, I think, for example, of Stephen King, who was born with his ascendant ruler, the moon, in the 6th house. And he said that one of the reasons he struggled with addiction was because he had to pour so much energy into doing things that he couldn't stand, that he thought were just phony and fake and boring and not alive. And so drinking made him feel alive. There's something, it's like, oftentimes the issues with addiction that you'll see in the 6th house have to do with feeling enslaved and entrapped by things that are not life-giving. And there's a reason that alcohol was called, referred to as spirits.
Yeah.
Right. It's like, but then when you're like, this spirit isn't the right spirit, the alcohol spirit isn't the right one, and you're doing that work as Pluto's hitting your sun and Venus in the 6th, that's usually because coming right along the line is a very clear sense of what the right spirit is. And if astrology is coming along that timeline, that is a really good thing. That's a really good sign.
Yeah. Cool.
There can also be like, what if astrological services along with your artwork is something that is meant to come together somehow? So, the transit that I would look at for you, I'll just end with this, because we're going on a little bit now. The transit that I would look at as a really exciting one for you would be the progression of Jupiter into Cancer in June of next year.
Okay.
In the 9th house, exalted 9th house Jupiter, that if astrology is meant to continue developing and be part of a spirit that's filling you positively and maybe helping you cultivate or develop confidence with the direction of your gifts, your career, and so forth, Jupiter in Cancer would be a good one to help, with that process. It'll hit squares to everything in your 12th and 6th houses, which can also just give you perspective and wisdom and understanding of things that are often difficult to understand in those houses. So if you even look back to the last time Jupiter was in Cancer, in that house, which would have been like 2000, I think it was about 2013, something like that. You could go back and see like what was happening around that time too,
Yeah. I changed careers.
Yeah, there you go. I mean, yeah. So I think like, keep that in mind. And also just keep in mind that you've got one last solar eclipse coming in Aries on March. What is it? Hold on. Let me just see it really quick. So the solar eclipse in Aries, I want to say it's like March 29th.
Okay.
Let me go forward a little bit. So March, it is it's the 29th of March that the eclipse is taking place in your 6th house, the sign of your sun, right? And it's not hitting any planet directly, But I would watch for that at the end of March, along with Saturn and Neptune entering your sixth, a Venus retrograde all throughout March in your sixth in Aries, right? Those are big events that'll start activating that sixth house. When whatever house contains your sun, when it's activated so strongly like that, there's often a big wave of events that will take place that will help clarify the life purpose and direction.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Wow. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you bet. And sorry for the audio issues we were having there, but it was great to have you on.
No, I really appreciate you, Adam. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you bet. Have a great day. I'm going to keep rolling along here. Okay, bye. Okay, I'm going to move on to Nora. Hello, Nora. Oh, you're muted. I can't hear you.
Okay, how about now?
Yeah,
Okay,
rocking the AC/DC. I love it.
Yeah. I am currently driving, so I'm listening, but I won't be able to watch you.
No, that's fine. You just keep your eyes on the road.
Well, I'm close to where I'm going, so I can pull over.
Okay. Well, what's your date of birth?
07/03/99, and then it's 7:46. I think it's Grand Rapids, Michigan.
Is it AM or PM?
PM. Sorry.
So I have July 7th, 1999, 7:46 p.m. in Grand Rapids, Michigan.
Actually, July 3rd.
Oh, sorry. Did I get it? I did it the other way around. Okay, here we go. July 3rd, 1999. A fellow Cancer.
Yeah.
Love hanging out with my Cancer people. Okay, so I've got Sagittarius rising for you. Does that sound right?
Yep, that's right.
Okay, I'm going to put your chart up on the screen. What do we want to talk about today, Nora? What's on your mind?
Career, and really, I would say career for sure.
Okay, fair enough. Maybe a few background questions that will help. Tell me what you do or what you want to do or what you're doing now, what you have done, whatever.
Yeah, so I've done pretty much everything, jack of all trades, master of none. But I'm currently right now, I am a dog sitter and have a online vintage clothing company that I started back in like 2021 that I'm really trying to close the chapter on now and move on. I've always had kind of a love for the entertainment industry and the spotlight and leadership and anything creative like that. I took a acting class as of recently, trying to re-spark that passion. And I really want to know if that would be a waste of time to go back into the big spotlight entertainment industry, or if I should, since I'm 25, focus on more stable careers.
Right. What would a stable career be? Do you have any in mind already?
No.
Right. Can I ask you something?
Yeah.
All right. Let's say
I'm
that
where I'm supposed to be now, so I can fully watch.
Okay, great. Perfect. Let's say that you were to pursue acting, entertainment, and let's say that it opened 2 or 3 different doors than fame and success in that industry, but they were the perfect doors that needed to open, and they opened because you took the risk of going down the acting path. Would that still be worth it to you?
You cut out. I only heard the end of what you said.
We're having some interesting audio issues today. Okay, so let me try this again. If you were to take the risk to pursue your interest in acting and entertainment, and let's say that going down that path, 2 or 3 different doors opened up, not the doors of fame and long-term career in Hollywood or acting, but different doors that opened up because you went down that path, would it be worth it?
Yeah, I mean, whatever's supposed to be is supposed to be, yeah.
Yeah, of course. So whenever someone comes to me and says, I could go do this thing that I'm really passionate about, I don't know how it will go, right? I don't know if it'll end up that I'll get the thing that I want. Or I could go do this other thing that's probably more practical, more grounded. And I say, well, what is that thing? And they go, I don't know. Right? Like, what is that practical thing? What is that stable career you would have? I don't know. Something that would suck. I don't know what it is, but it would, like that. my advice always, without needing to look at the astrology at all, is follow your bliss. Your bliss will open the right doors. Taking a path of, some preconceived or set idea about how your life should be or what's safer or more grounded or whatever usually will lead to joylessness. And whereas if you take the path that you're really passionate about, the most likely thing that will happen is that passion will open other doors, even if it doesn't end in fame or acting or whatever. It's your passion that opens the door. It's your love. It's your heart. It's when you pour those things into whatever you do that will open the next door for you. And I don't even have to look at the chart to know that. I just know that because I've seen so many people over the years that good things happen for when they follow their bliss, when they follow their joy, when they follow what is in their heart to do. Can you guarantee that it will result in, getting movie gigs or being a full-time actress? No, there's no way you can know that. But what you can know, I believe this, and you don't have to agree with me here, this is just my advice for you, is that if you follow that impulse and instinct to act, to be creative, that will open the right kinds of doors, whatever the next ones are supposed to be. So now that doesn't mean we can't do some astrology here together, but that'd be my first piece of advice for you, is that when you talk about acting, what I hear is the light of your spirit. When you talk about doing something else that's conventional, I hear there's a big nothing burger there,
Yeah.
It's like, I would say you got to go for it. You got to take the risk, because it's the risk of following your heart that matters and that will lead you in the right direction always. I believe that, even though it's really cheesy and sort of woo-woo. I'll never forget when I was in graduate school and I was like, God, what am I going to end up being, an English teacher here? Okay, I'm going to have some training in, English and composition, and I could be, and I just didn't want to do any of those things. And I remember that I decided to form an independent study in travel writing and use part of my, my financial aid to fund a trip to the Amazon to drink ayahuasca and to turn it into a travel log for a travel writing course that I designed with my my mentor in the program. And I had no idea. I just thought, well, what if this could lead to me writing a book about ayahuasca? What if it could lead to me finding something to write about that I care about? What if it could lead to a different career than having to be an English teacher, which I don't really want to do, but I don't know what else to do? And that decision opened up every subsequent door in my life that has followed. I didn't know I would become an astrologer. I didn't know that I would end up having a book, right? There was no way I knew what was coming, but a lot of good things happened because I took that risk of following something that felt real and alive and substantive. And I always tell people since then, you got to be practical. You got to make sure that you're not going to do any harm to yourself, but taking the risk of following your heart is always worth it.
Mm.
Now, when it comes to looking at what's happening right now, like as we're speaking, you've got Uranus squaring your natal Venus, right? Uranus and Taurus is squaring your Venus and Leo. As someone with Venus and Leo myself, I also have Venus and Leo. I can tell you that when Uranus squared my natal Venus just a couple years ago, I started writing my new book. The impulse creatively when Uranus is hitting your Venus is so powerful and so important to follow, right? And that's your heart, is your creative heart is there with Venus and Leo, right? So the advice I would have for you right now, especially because we're talking about this while Uranus is squaring your Venus, is you've got to follow that big-hearted lioness inside of you that wants to be creative, that wants to pursue, like in the ninth house, we think about the ninth house where your Venus is located as a place of philosophy and higher learning. And could you go to school? Could you pursue more training in something creative? That'd be one way of looking at it. But a much broader way of looking at it is Venus and Leo in the ninth house wants to shape and develop your view of truth itself in this lifetime. What does that mean? Well, it means that there's a part of this life that is about the philosophical or spiritual journey overlapping with the creative romantic dimensions of your being, that the creative romantic dimensions of your being can be like a lamppost or a lighthouse or a North Star guiding you through life. That's a Venus in the 9th house in a way that we don't always talk about it. But it's very important if you have Venus in the 9th house, you consider the impulses of love, romance, beauty, art, creativity to literally be like a star guiding you home. So I would really encourage you, with Uranus squaring your Venus and Venus in the 9th, to follow the calling of your creative self and just see where it goes. Have an open mind about it. Don't set yourself up for one version of failure or success when you go for it either. Be open to what success might look like in the hands of the gods or goddesses and have fun with it. Just go for it.
Is there any sort of inclination on things that I might have more fortune if I pursued?
Yes. So again, I'm not trying to give you a bunch of woo-woo. I'm trying to give you the best astrological reading I know how to give, and that is this. What looks most fortunate in your chart, right? When we're asking that question, we're asking it from a particular moment in our life. And that particular moment is going to be reflected by the transits in the sky at the time we're asking. When you're asking that question right now, what looks fortunate in your chart to me? Venus, the goddess of fortune, right? She was called the goddess of good fortune. She's in Leo, getting a square from Uranus and Taurus. What is the great work? Think of that as like a 6th house theme. What is the great work of my life? You've got Jupiter and Saturn in the 6th house, a place of hard work, dedication, sacrifice. What sign are they in? They're in Venus's sign. Where is Venus in the 9th house? So I would say it's a Venusian direction. Where do I see good results coming in your life? I would say go in the direction of Venus, especially given that you're asking that question like right now.
Okay. So like what vocations would be Venusian?
Well, there's many, anything with respect to art, beauty, people, relationships. Sometimes Venus in the 9th house in Leo can be like a coach or a mentor or a teacher, usually with a really kind of affirming, positive, encouraging like feature. Like Venus in the 9th reminds me of your most likable professor in college who just makes you feel really encouraged. Mm-hmm. Venus in the 9th could also be someone who studies therapy, there sometimes the Venusian dimension is relational, some form of relational counseling could be. And again, obviously you have Venus as art and all of those kind of classic dimensions of art and beauty, women, the feminine, things that are creative or performative, especially in the sign of Leo. Also, anything that would be teaching those things could take place through Mercury being in that house, the North Node, Venus, all of those planets. There's something like there can be sometimes also like some really interesting connections with foreign countries. Like it's not unusual to see the career house ruler, Mercury in this case, along with Venus in the 9th, as suggesting some kind of success in a foreign culture or country. It's kind of like a little, it's a little like peripheral, but that could be. But otherwise, yeah, I would say the creative, relational, romantic, spiritual, philosophical, educational dimensions of life, that's definitely one of the strongest pieces of your chart. Your career house rulers in the 9th, you've got benefic Venus there, you've got the lot of fortune there, you've got the North Node there. So some really strong, like a really prominent 9th house.
Okay.
Yeah. There's obviously like you can play with some of the other placements too. I tend to go in the direction of like what's kind of at the heart of the moment that I'm seeing someone, right? And so, when you've got Uranus squaring Venus and the leading question has to do with whether or not to pursue a creative endeavor, that's the kind of risk that a Uranus-Venus dynamic usually does well pursuing.
Okay. So go after it even if it's not the end goal.
Yeah. I mean, what I would say is go after it with an open mind as to what it could open or what it could unlock or what it could lead to.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. And then I had another question. I have the exact opposition of Mars and Jupiter and in a day chart in the 11th and the 6th house. And I don't really, as much as I've tried to understand and study it, I don't know how that interprets.
Sorry, ask that one more time. I don't think I followed you.
That's okay. I have my Mars in an exact opposition with my Jupiter in the 11th and 6th house at 29 and 0 degrees. So I know that's more of like a karmic finishing and beginnings, but is there more to that I can explore as far as the interpretation?
Yeah, interesting. It's not technically an opposition until Mars crosses the sign boundary. So
Okay.
the appropriate way of reading that from the Hellenistic standpoint would be a progressing of Mars into Scorpio opposing Jupiter in Taurus. So the opposition should be read from Scorpio in the 12th to Taurus in the 6th.
Okay.
But you certainly can, right? Because that's so close to happening that I read oppositions across sign boundaries, but you have to progress the symbolism across the sign boundary to read the aspect appropriately in terms of how the karma will develop in the lifetime. So given all of that, yeah, Mars opposite Jupiter is it's not totally dissimilar from what we were talking with Laura about. We were talking about what kind of work and effort is worth it that you can live with. Mars in the 12th will often be, there's so many different ways of talking about Mars in the 12th, but in this context, opposite Jupiter in the 6th, I would say that there's a real ability in your chart to sacrifice and work on behalf of things that you care about. But you have to be very careful that your sacrifice and labor and effort is not on behalf of things that feel entrapping or enslaving. For example, with Moon in the 4th, trine Sun in the 8th in Cancer, there's an interesting trine going on there. Well, if it's okay, I'll just ask a question about your background.
Ask away.
Okay, cool. So, what was your family like growing up, especially your mom? I'm thinking of the Moon there,
She's fantastic. I'm pretty sure she's on this live. Honestly, she's the one that recommended you to me.
That's cool. That's really awesome. So, Mom, what'd she do? Like, did she do? Was she a homemaker or did she have a job?
She was a nurse and worked. She was a mom to all of my friends growing up as well. Very much the epitome of a great mother.
That's awesome. Yeah. So it's like strong angular moon. Has there been any kind of burden or weightiness that she's carried that you've seen her carry or have to deal with in her life?
Nonstop.
Yeah. Is there anything you can share that's okay to share?
Yeah. She had a lot of trauma, abuse in any way that you can imagine in her childhood. And then had health issue after health issue. She had cancer, lost one of her uteruses, just like all of the feminine karmic, it's very karmic, like paying off debts and, just lots and lots of hardship through life.
Yeah. And right now, I didn't ask this earlier, so I apologize if you mentioned it. I don't remember, but do you have kids? Are you married?
No, I'm in a 7+ year relationship, but we are not married and we have no kids.
Okay. And is your dad still around too?
Kind of. They were separated about 5 years ago. He lives in the area, but that's it.
Okay. So one question that I have would be, okay, well, let's just put it this way before we could go. If we had a full hour to talk, I have so many like interesting thoughts and ideas for how we could explore this Moon in the 4th. But the basic thing that I want to point to is that your Moon in the 4th is an incredibly caring, kind of motherly. I'm not surprised to hear you had a strong mom figure, right, with that Moon in the 4th. The Cancer Sun in the 8th is a little potentially more difficult when it comes to the kinds of obligations that a mother figure carries to other people. So the background with the cancer and the trauma and the abuse and all of that stuff, kind of that fits with the Cancer Sun in the 8th, right? So one of the things that you have to be careful of when you have this kind of configuration with the sun and moon in your chart like this is the potential to get sucked into caring for and nurturing things that, of course, on one level you care about, but that may drain you, because the 8th house will sort of suck you, especially with Cancer in the 8th. There's a strong tendency to a Cancer sun in the 8th to give and give and give and be like, have this like rich maternal reservoir of caring and nurturance for people or things or whatever. But in the 8th house, it very well could be other people's things and not your own.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So when you see the Venus in Leo, what we're talking about as a creative path in life, we've been emphasizing, right? But you see the ruler is the sun in the 8th in Cancer. Yeah. So those two are averse to one another. So what could kind of hijack that Venus, right? One of the things would be getting entangled in caring for things and obligations to things that you care for that take you away from your dharma. Does that make sense? Now, the reason that I'm connecting that to the Mars Jupiter is very simple. Jupiter's your ascendant ruler, right? So when you see Mars going into the 12th, opposing your ascendant ruler, and then the Mars is going to have participation in the watery trigon in the chart as it advances into Scorpio, which would mean that there is a form of self-sacrifice or even martyrdom for things you care about, but things that will nonetheless take you away from your dharma. So that Mars opposite Jupiter comes in as a way of challenging you with respect to where your investment of energy is relative to your own gifts and own abilities and your need to be in service to them, as opposed to the other things that you would care for. And there may be a way in which you have to carry the tension of two things, maybe eventually being a mom yourself or whatever the case might be. But what I would say is that in a chart like this, if you slide into, let's just say, a domestic life or domestic routines or caring for things that don't really reflect your true passions, it's not that you don't care about them. It's just that maybe they become more dominant than the development of your own ambitions. That's where you're going to see those moksha houses, 12, 8, and 4, becoming problematic.
Yeah, I feel like that might be where I'm at the moment, which is odd.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's the Uranus squaring the Venus. So, again, like at this particular moment, as long as you have the practical means and base of support to allow you to pursue things creatively and still sustain and take care of yourself and feel there's a grounded part of all of this, right? That always comes into, but if you're just saying, hey, I want to do this thing, I want to take this risk, I think you're going to see that those risks are very important to the overall arc of your life, your career, and the balancing of the other things you care for in contrast to the things that are about yourself.
Okay, gotcha.
Well, I'm glad that I could help you out for a minute,
Is there
Nora. I hope this
more
was useful.
to unpack there?
There's always more.
It's
I feel like
super
I need to.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. I think we've got a little bit of a lag. So yeah, thank you for coming on. Really appreciate it. And I hope that this was useful for you. And let's talk again sometime. Okay. Well, I'll do one more and I'm going to try to call a guy on. Oh, he left. Okay. Let's see here. Let's go to Laura. Another Laura. Hi, Laura.
Yeah, it's the day of Laura's.
It is. Oh, gosh.
Hi,
okay.
Adam.
How are you doing?
Oh, well, okay, I guess.
Yeah, okay is the passing grade. I guess that'll be cool.
I give it a C.
Yeah, what's your date of birth?
It is 7/24/1975.
And the time?
11:13 p.m.
And the place?
Bremerton, Washington, and the zip 98312.
Oh, how do I spell the city?
BREMERTON.
Okay, and that's Washington, you said?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So I have you as an Aries rising. Does that sound right?
Yes, sir.
All right, fantastic. I'm going to put your chart up on the screen. Laura says the day of Laura's. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Okay. Now I've got your chart up on the screen. Tell me what we could look at today or what we could get into that would be useful for you.
Well, I feel like as of right now, my life is kind of crumbling and falling apart all of a sudden. And I wonder if it really has to do with Pluto, which is pretty much opposite my sun. So I kind of wonder if it kind of coincides with that.
Sure. So you're thinking about the Pluto Sun transit that's you got a little taste of last year that's now coming right back again.
Right.
Okay. Let me just back up. Sorry, you were just saying what happened so far under that transit. Can you just repeat that for me?
So for like the last year and a half, year and a third, I have been working at a job that I really hate. It pays good, but
Sure.
it has nothing to do with anything that I like. And now I think the stress of it all is causing medical problems. So now I get to deal with that. So I feel trapped. So I'm kind of stuck, and any insight is helpful.
Yeah, totally. Let me ask you something. Is it okay if I ask what you do?
Yeah. So I work on base for the government.
Okay, got it.
Yeah. So I was working. Well, I don't want to be too specific, but
That's okay. I mean, so you work for it's the military. You're on the base, and it's not something that you love. Is that a good summary?
yes.
Yeah, got it. Is there a history of this kind of service in your family?
Yes.
All right. Yeah. And did you feel in some ways like was there not a pressure or an expectation, or did you fall into this line of work kind of through the family somehow?
I would say it was part family and part my marriage partner. Because he works in the same place. And what I was doing before, even though I really enjoyed it, I didn't make very much money. And I think my self-esteem got the worst of me. And I was like, well, I need to go do that too. You know, so my dad will be proud of me, and, and my husband will like it, and blah, blah, blah. But I think all it's doing is just hurting me. So I'm just not sure what to do.
Yeah. Well, let's see if we can't find a place in the chart that describes the situation first, because once we do that, it's usually a lot easier to then discover a transit that might activate that karma that once we find it in the chart, then we know what we need to look for with respect to transits that could activate and change the dynamic. So the sixth house is a place. Oh, we got the big circle out. Okay, there we go. Here's the sixth house. The sixth house I'm about to give a webinar in December on the sixth house, so I'm gearing up to give a good class on this. But the sixth house in ancient Greek astrology is called Mala Fortuna, which means bad fortune. It's the joy of Mars and the house of war and conflict. And it is a place that is associated with karmic debts that we have in Indian astrology that will play out through various kinds of conflicts, stresses, pressures, or a general feeling of misfortune or bad luck. And we all have an allotment of that in our life because we live in a karmic reality. We have past lives. That's the basic framework that ancient astrology assumes. That does not mean that everything in the sixth house is bad. It doesn't mean that those things aren't actually there for our spiritual benefit or even benefit us in other ways too. So there's very constructive ways that we can end up looking at it. But a very basic thing that we look at for the sixth house is, where is there going to be a feeling of karmic enslavement or entrapment? I feel entrapped is kind of what you said, right?
Yeah.
So notice that we have your career house is, we're going to look up here. That's Capricorn. And we're going to take the ruler of the 10th and the ruler of the 6th, and we're going to combine them in the 4th house of home and family with Saturn in its detriment in that sign.
Mm-hmm.
We also have an aversion between these two planets in Cancer and the ruler, which is the moon in Aquarius in the 11th. So what does this speak to overall, this dynamic? It speaks to a karmic pattern of feeling entrapped or obligated or having some difficult karma with respect to career and its connection to family, and some feeling of disconnect between the kinds of people or places in the world that you probably belong in, that you feel at home in, and the kinds of environments that you end up in due to your family, due to the way in which family karma intersects with some of that 6th house karma and that 10th house karma and the kind of work you end up doing, right? So we can see it in the charts, very clear. We can also see that the ruler of the marriage house is a fallen Venus in the 6th house, right? So it puts the spouse into that same world and same container, creates a little matrix that connects the spouse and marriage to the same exact constellation, right? So that's all there. There's other things too. For example, you may find in time with Venus squaring Neptune in the 9th that the differences between you and your spouse with respect to things that you believe really change, that there's tension or conflict between your beliefs and outlook and philosophy on life. That is also appears to be kind of a dynamic that you'll be working through, one way of looking at it there. So we can see all of the things that you've mentioned. Most people, they look at this and then they go, okay, great. Am I doomed? Can this change? Right? It's like,
I'm
yes,
doomed.
right? Of course it can change. Of course it can change, because the chart is a picture of what we are, of the like field of raw material that we're here to work with karmically. And what would a life be if there weren't opportunity to make choices and to shift and change who we are through our consciousness in relation to the field that we are born into? I don't know what kind of life that would be, right? So we have to assume that there's space here for us to make some shifts and changes. The way that I would look at this would then be, we need aspects. We need aspects to those planets, Mercury and Saturn. We need karma busting transits, just to be kind of cheesy about it. So there are some. Let me show you what they are. We're cooking with some fire in this one. This is really good. Okay, so let's see here. Let me get the bi-wheel up on the screen here for you so you can see kind of your transits along with us. Okay, can you see the bi-wheel on the screen?
Yeah.
Okay, so here's what I want to focus in on. We're going to have Mercury retrograde going over your sun. Or excuse me, Mars retrograde going over your sun.
Mm-hmm.
That's happening early January, at the same time that Pluto's moving into the exact opposition with your sun. Now, I told you we want to get planets on Saturn and Mercury, but it is very helpful to have big transits like this to the sun, because the sun is the most general picture in the chart of life purpose and feeling fulfilled and luminous. We were talking about that spirit that should be flowing through us, that the 5th house is called the joy derived from one's dharma. That's how it's talked about in Indian astrology. When you have a sun in Leo in that house, the goal of the lifetime is to feel happiness in being yourself. Like literally to find my function. Doesn't have to be like I'm Oprah Winfrey to have a function, right? It just needs to be, I feel like I'm me, and I feel like I'm there's some joy coming like a wellspring. It naturally fills up. Maybe it'll empty out. Not every day is good, right? But I'm in touch with joy because I'm being myself and I'm doing things that make me feel happy. Does it need to be meteoric happiness? No, but it needs to be a feeling of purpose. And most of us can feel that fulfillment a lot more simply than we think. We've been taught in our culture that it has to be this meteoric vision of success to feel happy. The sun in the 5th house just says, no, it literally just needs to be, ask yourself this question day by day, do you feel happy? If that question is more yes than no, the 5th house sun is doing its work, right? And so that's what we're trying to get in touch with here in your chart. First of all, it is hugely helpful to have Pluto opposing your sun, because everything that feels dead, everything that feels trapped, everything that feels Saturnian, everything that feels like you're having to conform in places to things that don't meet or match the joy that lives in your heart, those things will be amplified and exacerbated to the extent that there will be a kind of healing crisis or a push from an evolutionary perspective to create more of a feeling of purpose and happiness. That you're going through that right now is not necessarily easy, but it's good, right?
Yeah.
So the feedback that you're getting, the way your body is responding, these are really important things that can contribute to a kind of death and rebirth that's ultimately very positive right now. Mars coming over this is going to make all of this very acute in the early part of the year, because you're going to get a Mars-Pluto opposition right over your sun. But then here's where I think we have to look. And this is Mars retrograde coming over Saturn and Mercury. This is late January. You see that right there?
Yeah.
It's at the bottom of the chart. Let me just highlight it. It's right there.
Oh, okay.
So this is late January. We're going to see Mars come right over those two planets, like January 20th through maybe the 25th, right around there. As that happens, then Mars is going to station, and eventually it turns direct by late February. Then Mars is going to head forward and go back over those placements by late March, early April. Why is that important? That's important because in the month of March, you're going to have a Venus retrograde that is starting off just a few degrees off your ascendant in your first house. When you get a Venus retrograde in the first house, often there is a major exploration of you, who you are, your identity in relation to pleasure and happiness. Venus in the first has so much to do with rewiring our lives, Venus retrograde in the first, with rewiring our lives with respect to who we are and how happy we feel. It's a very basic Venus retrograde in the first house kind of symbol. Sometimes people get their hair cut, they get new wardrobe, they do things that are, we might think of as sort of superficial, but it can also be very deep and existential. I suspect it will be for you because we have such a powerful emphasis on the Mercury, the Saturn. We also have a powerful emphasis on the Sun from Pluto. And then we get this Venus retrograde in your first house. Well, isn't it interesting that right after that Venus retrograde in your first house, by the end of March, we get a solar eclipse 3 degrees off from your ascendant in the first house in Aries, further sort of announcing that, hey, it is time to really focus on me and who I seek to become right now. That's a solar eclipse on your ascendant, like first line of the textbook. I am changing. I am transforming. I am becoming someone new. I am not happy with the way I act or behave in the world or the role I play. The first house was called Dharma. So Venus retrogrades followed by this. 2 days later, Neptune enters your first house in Aries, creating more of an emphasis on the need to explore identity. What does Neptune seek to bring into our sense of self when it moves into the first house? Things that are transcendent, things that are creative, things that are imaginative, transcendental, otherworldly. What can it also do? Amplify the feeling of discontent we have. I don't feel good in my body. I don't feel good in my life. I feel like I'm yearning for something and it's not there, and there's disappointment. Saturn at the end of May will then enter your first house. Saturn and Neptune together create an even more amplified sense that things aren't right. I need to be someone different. And I can tell because my body's giving me the feedback or right. And then Saturn can start to create the practical sense of what needs to be done. If I want something to be different, I have to take these steps. They're hard, they're real, they're adult, they require a mature, serious, practical outlook. If I embrace that outlook, I take the courage that Saturn in Aries says I have to take to make a change, then I can start to rise up from a debilitated condition. Saturn in Aries is in its fall, but paradoxically, when it's in the first house, it will help you rise up by amplifying exactly what is making you feel so low. Well, what's happening at the exact same time? Pluto's retrograding back into the opposition with your sun, which will come around again by September. During that time, we then see Jupiter in the sign of Cancer reaching Mercury and Saturn in the fourth. And that Jupiter at the bottom of the chart is exalted. So first part of the year, a little agonizing, right? A little like amplifying all the things that aren't bringing happiness, creating maybe the conditions of crisis that bring about the needed changes. But by the time you get later into the year and Pluto's retrograding back onto the sun, right? And Jupiter is in exalted Jupiter's going over those two planets, bringing good fortune to them. You get Pluto going through direct motion to your sun by the end of November. Jupiter retrogrades across Mercury and Saturn by December. The latter part of the year seems to emphasize the reform, the transition, the transformation. And so I would just give you a lot of encouragement to endure the first part of the year, which might be the part where you have to get really real about what's holding you back from a deeper level of happiness. And then later in the year, you see these transits coming in to maybe create more support for making some changes.
Okay.
It's hard in a short period of time. If we had an hour, I would love to be able to go much more deeply into this, but I hope for now that this gives you some hope and some encouragement. And just know that, okay, we were able to identify some difficult parts of your chart, but there's so much promise in your chart. I mean, Pluto in the 11th, by the time it hits your moon, you're going to be in a different social dimension of life that's probably a lot more fulfilling than maybe some of the everyday social experience that you're in now that feels like a mismatch too. So there's a lot of good things happening in your chart right now. And I think that this is a very powerful year ahead for you.
Okay. Do you see any general career types that look good for me? I consider myself kind of a Cancerian type of person because I do feel most comfortable at home doing, chores and stuff like that.
Yeah. I think that, I mean, Mercury Cancer in the 4th in a really sweet way is just very hermit-like, it's like, just like your own, like private, like, look at that planet. It looks so cozy. I like the lights around it, like, I have no doubt that those Cancerian planets have many ways of expressing themselves. And it's a clear contrast. You got Jupiter and Aries in the 1st house, which looks so outgoing, but it's square to Mercury and Saturn in the 4th. So you're like the image that comes to my mind just looking at your setting is like a heat lamp in a like a warm little ecosystem.
Oh, that sounds about right. Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it. I hope this was useful for you.
I appreciate you, Adam. Thank you so much. And keep your sense of humor going because I love it.
Thanks. I'll do my best. You have a great rest of your day.
All right. You too. Take care.
Okay, bye. Awesome. Another really great live session today. I appreciate all of you so much. And I always hope in doing these live streams that people who are interested in learning astrology can take away something really positive from seeing another astrologer read charts. I feel like there's not enough of seeing live readings in the realm of astrology. Like, you get a lot of talks on craft and technique and history and philosophy, and you get a lot of reporting on mundane forecasts, but where do we actually get to see and experience live readings from practitioners? There's like a wall around that. I think there has to be, obviously, for the sake of like private practice, but there's also a real emphasis I place in all of my programs on doing live readings for people in the classroom. In my classrooms, we do full hour readings. So you can see an actual reading. These are just kind of mini readings and kind of have to be short and sweet and packaged in a certain way. But to see live readings, I think, is useful when you're studying astrology. You can see how someone addresses something, the choices that an astrologer makes, that, the different pathways you might have taken in contrast to the way the astrologer reading takes. And all of that really refines and can really shape us as readers. So I hope that you got to learn something from those and be encouraged too in our own paths. We all have transits coming up, we all have things that we worry about. And sometimes it can just help to see an astrologer being like, look, you've got this, but this transit is exactly what you may need to heal something or to transform a difficult pattern. Just hearing encouraging, hopeful guidance for other people can help us relate to our own transits, which when we get into the echo chamber of our own head with can become quite overwhelming. So, be encouraged anyway. That's the idea. So on that note, I will sign off. I will be doing another live stream next week. I'll be doing one per week between now and the end of the year as a way of trying to rally support for the Kickstarter campaign. I want to thank all of you who have donated. We are at 181 backers. I'd like to see if we can get 19 more and cross the 200 marker here before Thanksgiving tomorrow. I think that would be a great goal for the day. If you like this program and you can spare $5, it really does help. We have a whole staff that we support through the success of the Kickstarter. We offer donation-based readings, which, by the way, I want to show you that. That would be a great thing to show you guys really quick. You guys helped us to create last year to create a donation-based reading service. Let me take you over and show you that, because if you're like, hey, I could really use a reading, you know what? We have readings. We have a whole staff of readers and affordable prices. So if you go over to the website, nightlightastrology.com, click on the book a reading, click on need-based astrology readings, and you are going to find when you scroll down that we have priced tiers. So at the top, you'll see our course directors. These 3 readers, Saffron, Meg, and Raimundo, are the course directors for our Nightlight programs, and they have a really nice advanced set of skills and are very good readers. All of our readers are great, but they're sort of like our top tier of readers. We have all of our seasoned tutors who tutor in our programs and are there answering questions from students in all of our forums. These are also wonderful readers on staff, and the price goes down a little bit on this tier. And then we have emerging talent. These are some of our most promising alumni from recent programs, and they are gaining experience reading. This is some of their first readings that they're doing, but they are very talented. I handpicked every single one of them from my programs because they are so promising and so warm and kind-hearted. And you'll find these are very affordable. $49 for an hour reading is easily one of the most affordable rates in the industry. Up a tier for an hour at $89, and then up a tier at $159. You will find that like people like leading astrologers in the field are often between $250 and $350 for an hour. And that's because we have limited spots and we're trying to, make our entire living based on client practices. So I have stepped back from reading so that I can focus on developing the talent of my staff and people from our programs. And I think that's really important. I've done 14,000 readings in my career, and I'm still doing them all the time through my classrooms. But now it's time to try and build the careers of some other astrologers too, and give myself some time to write my book as well, right? So if you're looking for an affordable reading, you guys helped us build this, and this is the kind of stuff that I can promise you when you support Nightlight, you are continuing to support the development of. So you will also find that all of our programs have need-based versions of the tuition, so that some people are taking our class who have next to nothing, right? And we make sure that nobody's priced out of our programs. And one of the main reasons we're able to do that is because the Kickstarter serves as a kind of flash sale for our programs and support of the channel. And this model of like, I'm going to create free content, I'm just going to give it generously, and then at the end of the year, if you appreciate it, I ask the generosity to come back around and support us. This model of generosity has been at work for 11 years in Nightlight. And when you participate, you're truly supporting a vision of astrological accessibility that makes sure that like anybody who wants to immerse themselves in this can. So I think that's the best way that I know how to do a business model at the end of the day. And it's been successful thus far, thanks to all of you who see the vision and appreciate it. So if you would like to join the Kickstarter and pitch in, join one of our classes, or pick up a reward, the link is there. It's in the comment section. It's in the description of this video. Let's see if we can't get to 19 more backers today. That would be fantastic. Thank you everybody for being here. I will be posting again shortly. I will be posting an announcement on Instagram and under the live tab of my channel for next week's live stream. And next week's live stream will be different. We'll ask different questions. Today was a little personal, a little philosophical. Next week, we might switch back to answering more technical questions, but I like to switch it up a little bit, and we will do more live readings as well next week. So that's it for today. Have a good one. We'll see you again soon. Bye, everyone.